Merritt. I'm the president of the board of the WBA, the Waldoboro Business Association, and we're hosting tonight. So I wanted to, Katie Winchenbach will not be here tonight. She has regretfully declined to come. She's more comfortable in small groups. Don't laugh. I know it's small. I know, but it could have been bigger. Okay, I'm going to introduce just our candidates quickly, and then I'll introduce our moderator. And Abden Simmons and Seth Hall are two candidates for selectmen. Our moderator tonight is Jacob Newcomb. He's a teacher up to the high school. He teaches, if I'm right, social studies and government. He's also the coach for the debate team, and he's the district rep for the union. So he has agreed to come and help us out to moderate our night, our candidates' night. Oh, you want to introduce the format first?
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for coming tonight. The format for tonight, each candidate will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves. We will then have a series of questions that will be asked to both candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Now I do warn you, I judge debate meets as well, and as a debate judge, it's your job to keep time, and sometimes I forget to, when certain time is up, but I'll do my best to keep my eye on the clock. Would you guys like a knock or hand warnings as far as when you're getting close to?
Sure,
Okay, I'll do 2 knocks for 2 minutes to go, 1 minute, sort of thing, if you want.
Well, if they got 2 minutes to start.
Right, in your 5 minutes.
maybe 30 seconds or something.
Sure. Yes, so after our series of questions that will be asked to both candidates, I will then ask each candidate a pointed question designed for them. They'll have 2 minutes to answer that question. And this will be followed up by 2 wrap-up questions, after which you, the public, will have the opportunity to ask your own questions of the candidates. Okay? Is everyone ready to begin?
Sure.
All right. As we said, please give us a little background on yourself, and I'm not sure who would like to start, but
A comes before S.
okay, sure.
All right. Well, I'm Abden Simmons. I've lived here pretty much all my life. I moved out of town for a year into my father's house that he grew up in for a year until I found a house on Jefferson Street 25 years ago in September. And I dig clams for a living. I've been on the Shellfish Committee here for 15 plus years. Been on the Select Board for the last 3 years. I've been on numerous state boards related to commercial fishing, and that's my life. And I've been, like I said, I've been on the Select Board for the last 3 years, and slowly, progressively getting things moving forward, and hope to continue. So,
Good.
yeah.
You're well within your 5 minutes.
Oh, and also, I'm the state representative for our area. So,
All right. Thank you. Seth?
Do I get the balance of his time?
Sure.
one of those guys.
And I hope this, somebody said, oh, you're going to the debate tonight. I sort of hope this is more of a conversation than a debate. That's the best way to listen and get information back and forth. So I'm Seth Hall. I've been in Waldoboro for just over 9 years. Came up from Massachusetts, where I had a interesting life for basically my whole life. I started out as an aspen tree crew foreman, doing tree trimming all over Vermont. I became a tool maker when I discovered that I was pregnant. Well, my wife was pregnant, and we needed health care. And did that for a while. I was a Class A steel fitter, so I'm sort of blue collar for the first 20 years, 15 work years of my life. I then did a radical sort of switch when I separated from my wife, and went back to school. I dropped out of high school and just went to work when I was 17. And I went back to school, to night school, and took a degree in international political economy and philosophy, and finished that up. Took about 6 years of working full-time, running my business and going to night school. Enjoyed it a lot. I like politics. I like sociology and why things happen, why people make things tick. More recently, I left MIT, which is the last place I worked there for almost 30 years, doing research computing systems management. And I won't even bother to tell you what that is. It's sort of sitting in dark rooms with lots of blinking lights and noisy disks, and a lot of human interface as well. I supported about 250 people for most of my career, using laptops and giant servers and everything in between. So I'm sort of a technical guy. I did a couple of years of consulting after that in digital fabrication and rapid prototyping, which is a deep interest of mine since I was a tool maker. And then I came basically in Waldoboro. I retired at 65 involuntarily. We ran out of grant funding and had to discover something new. I've been here for about 6 years before that, came up in 2009, I believe, and lived down on Gross Neck in the old Giel farm, the gray farmhouse on the top of the hill and the big mowings there. I've been interested in politics for a long time. I lived here for, I guess, about 3 years before I dipped my toes in and started doing committee work, and I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. There's a little more information if you want to read the paper tomorrow. I put a letter to the editor in that talked a little bit about why I do this kind of stuff and why I'm interested. More recently, the committees I've been on were the Communications Technology Committee, actually the Broadband Subcommittee that preceded that. I was one of the founding members. The Conservation Committee for a year, the School Committee for RCD 40, and I was also a board member for Region 8, the Mid-Coast School of Technology, which I still am as a board member at large for RSU 40. I am no longer on the board of RSU 40. I've been on the Economic Development Committee, which is a keen interest of mine for, I guess, 5 years or something like that. And more recently, I've been on the, I was a founding member of the Renewable Energy Subcommittee of the EDC, which brought you, and we'd love to talk about this, the solar array up at the landfill, which I'm happy to say as of yesterday, when the sun stopped shining, had produced 42 megawatts of power, megawatt hours, which is a lot, and we can talk more about why that's important. I'm interested in economic development. I am a small businessman here, reconstituted, I guess, from my retirement, and I'm really interested in seeing what we can do here in Waldoboro. I get the feeling that this place is on the move, and we can talk more about that. That's, I guess, the bio part.
All right, thank you very much. Now on to our questions. We will be asking both candidates. Abden, if you'd start, why did you decide to run for selectman again?
Well, when I ran before, I ran because the board needed a change. It needed to be revitalized. I think people had asked me to run. Running the Shellfish Committee, I really didn't want to go further than what I was because it entailed in a lot more work and time involved. I was so engrossed in the shellfish program that we have. We've brought it. We're the biggest shellfish program in the state. We've done so many things with our shellfish committee. People said, well, why can't you go further and adjust yourself, get to the select board, and help the rest of the town out? And I did. I won, and I've tried. It took us a couple years, for myself to get acclimated to it. In the last year or so, we've leaps and bounds with the stuff that we've tried to do. We've got a good select board that gets along really well, and I think we've accomplished a lot in the last year, a little over a year. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Seth, same question.
So I ran last year unsuccessfully, but I was amazed. I got 150 votes with no campaign, which was not bad in the field of, I think we had 5 people running last year for 2 seats. I've seen a lot on my committee, in my committee work. I've been sort of a progenitor of some of it, in particular the solar array more recently. And I think there's a lot of opportunity that I see to keep the kind of work some of the committees have been doing going and be a little more active than I perceive the select board has been so far. There have been a couple of interesting initiatives in the last 3 years. I think we could do much more, particularly in terms of economic development, which we'll talk, I suspect, a lot more about. We have to not only control our budget, but control the development of the town. We have to think about all kinds of stuff like the new marijuana legislation, the opportunities to increase aquaculture in town, for example, how we think about and deal with expansion of our utility district, and excuse me, whether that impacts business growth in the Route 1 corridor, which I strongly feel that it does, whether we should think about TIF, tax incentive zones, which is something that the town hasn't used yet, but I think the Economic Development Committee has gotten deeply into a conversation about that. That's 30 seconds?
30 seconds left, yeah.
And I think for all those reasons, I would very much like to be a stirrer-upper a little bit of the select board. I'd like to inject a little new energy as I perceive it, and I guess that's a good summation for now.
We'll be touching on some of those issues later on. Seth, sticking with you, what do you think is the most pressing issue for the town of Waldoboro right now?
I guess I would say economic growth. In my view, in life experience, it seems to me that economic growth in the economic situation of the residents of a town really has a huge amount to do with how well the town does. Waldoboro has suffered some huge blows from loss of industrial employers here some years ago, and has had a hard time getting back on its feet. And then 2008 happened and made it even worse for everybody. I think the key to an active plan for economic development, in my mind, is on the town level is the select board. My experience is that hasn't been the case in this select board, in this town, in a lot of towns, to be fair. We're not different. Some people think that the town father should sort of watch the budget and keep the public safety in line and manage the day-to-day operations of the town, and that's sort of it. I have sort of a different view. I think a vision is a good thing to have, and being actively working for it, whether it's on a committee or the select board, it's really important. I would offer as an example, again, the Renewable Energy Committee that just in something like 6 months started to study the issue of whether we could do a solar power purchase agreement, decided that we could, negotiated with a vendor, Sundog Solar, to do it, negotiated with a number of parties, including the whole town, and I think Abden supported it, to put this in place, all at no taxpayer money. Not a penny was invested at all. And we ended up saving $2,500 a year this year. It'll be about $300 more every single year for the first 6 years. And then we have a great opportunity to save something like $400,000 over the next 30 years. So that's the kind of proactive thing I think the select board should be supporting.
Okay. Abden, same question to you. What do you think is the most pressing issue for the town of Waldoboro right now?
Seth's answers are pretty interesting, but you know, I think jobs are a big key, but we still got to have the businesses here. If we've got these other like broadband and all this other stuff in town, how come the businesses are not coming here? I believe the town's promoting to try to get businesses to come here, but what are the stumbling blocks? And I think having a new planner in town, which we've hired an outside source to contracted with to help us with a lot of this stuff. And I think that's some of the issues is the hurdles that companies have to go through to get here. And I think that's the biggest problem we have in this town. And I think the land use ordinances really need to be looked at and where they can be changed. You know, it took for I'll use my business as a case in point. It took me 6 months before I could even start to do my building. I had to jump through hoops continuously to even, it was almost to the point where it wasn't worth doing. So if it's happened to me that's lived here for 25 years, just imagine somebody that comes in from out of state or from another area in the state of Maine to come here and have to deal with that. That's not right. I mean, that's something we really got to look at if we're going to have economic development here. And there's some other issues like Seth said about aquaculture in the town. We had a aquaculture venture that was potentially going to go into Dutch Neck. Well, everyone around is excited except for the community in that area. Well, that's fine. They don't want it built in their backyard, but somebody wants to build something in somebody else's backyard, they don't want it in their backyard. So it's a revolving problem that it's fine, you can build it here, but just don't build it in my backyard. And that's kind of the mentality we have here. And it's very difficult to get businesses to come and be built here if you have that kind of, different neighborhoods have that kind of feel.
Okay, so,
Can we rebut it all, or?
yeah, well, we'll have a chance. What I want to follow up on that with Abden is, you've pointed out this issue of business development, hurdles, red tape. How would you address that issue?
We should look at the ordinance, the land use ordinance again, and go through it and actually have our new planners look at it and see where we can make these improvements. The planning board has looked at them, but I don't know if they've looked at them as far as what they feel the town needs, or if we should expand it and look at reducing the restrictions that we have. I mean, we had a sign ordinance that Seth had put in to manage the size of the signs and the percentage and stuff. It's all you're making things way too difficult. When we had a 4x8 sign, 4 foot by 8 foot sign that you could go by, that was it. It was pretty simple. But when you start changing those parameters, you're making things more difficult. We can't make things difficult. We got to reduce the amount of hurdles that these businesses have to jump through.
Okay, thank you. Seth, the follow-up question here is, how do you hope to address the pressing issue, what you view as the most pressing issue of the town of Waldeboro right now? You can use this time, I'd say, to address what Abden said, or to come up with something new.
I guess we have a slightly different view of the ordinances, although it's probably not that radically different. Abden and I both served on planning boards at different times, and so we both sort of know at least the basics of the guts of the ordinance. And I think we both agree that they need to be updated. It was one of the it was the principal agenda item when I was last elected to the chairmanship of the select board. That was our item of work. I regret to say that the new chair of the planning board hasn't driven it forward. I think that's unfortunate, but I think it needs to be done. There's no question about it. I'm not quite as convinced that we need to do wholesale rewriting of the ordinance, but I think some tweaking is necessary. In particular, for small home-based businesses, sort of which Abden's of one, and I'm another example. I live down in the rural district. I can't really do anything, hardly, at my house, according to the ordinances. There are ways around that. You can find another place, and I have done that. But I think places like my business and Hohob is another a good example. The ordinance really prohibits them from hiring too many employees as they're growing, and that puts a small business between a rock and a hard place, and that definitely needs to be revisited. I would make the side note that it's particularly unfortunate, and this sounds awful, but I'm going to say it. This is where a selectman could be important in helping select people for the planning board. Our current planning board chairman is in that zone in the area around the proposed Maritime Park, Aquaculture Park, who's one of the principal opponents. And I'm sure he would have recused himself, there's no question about that. But a selectman might feel that that's not the appropriate person to foster business in town. That's where an activist select board could really make a big difference. You could pick people that were particularly interested in economic development. I want to say I sat the site plan review for the shellfish business expansion that Abden has when he came to us. And there was a complicated issue, the way he first wanted to do it, about where he could put it in the state water regulations and flood zones for not one but 2 flood zones that happened to coalesce. There's an anomaly in the ordinance that should be fixed that Abden got trapped by. That's not the process of the planning board. That's a badly written ordinance. That's a very different thing, and we agree completely, I think, that those need to be redone.
Okay.
I do hope they'll do that soon.
Very good. Thank you. Great answers for those particular questions. Jen and I were discussing on the way in today about the fiber optic internet availability in the area and how exciting that can be for some folks. Seth, briefly describe your views on increasing fiber optic internet in Waldeboro.
A topic very, very close to my heart. As I mentioned, I was one of the founding group in the broadband subcommittee, along with John Lawrence and some other members of town, when the Economic Development Committee came to the realization that this just absolutely had to be a priority in town, which was the correct assessment. Later that turned into a permanent committee, not an ad hoc committee, called the Communication Technology Committee, which John is still the chair of. We've had some success getting Connect Me grants, which is great. We did the old Augusta Road. The local fiber incumbent, Lincolnville County Communications Company, sorry. It's called Tidewater Telecom to all of us, but the corporate company wired the town down here a little bit on their own dime, didn't get a penny from us or anybody else to do it with spare crew time, but that left people like Old Augusta Road completely stranded, and there was no funding. Fortunately, Connect Me allows towns to apply for competitive grants all over the state, and we have won, I believe, 3 total now, John?
2.
Wasn't the Wi-Fi grant one?
Oh, including the one.
Including the Wi. Yeah, so I think we've gotten 3 grants.
That one didn't work.
Yes, right. But it was a grant, so there was some money, and we can talk more about this. This is an interesting topic. But unfortunately, the take rate is the big problem. The take rate refers to the rate at which people either sign up or just out of the blue, or switch from a cable company, say, or a DSL company like Tidewater, Fairpoint. The take rate is a real problem, and it's a struggle for everybody, and the question is how to fix that. A second problem is how to get the outlying areas of town, something John's been working on for years, to become broadband accessible. A very expensive, difficult problem. And as John mentioned, the Wi-Fi doesn't work. Newer might. But the town has a real problem because the quintessential nature of broadband and its relationship to economic development. Anybody with a home business has to have broadband. It's just critical. Should I stop?
Yeah, okay. Abden, so shaking your head a little bit. Briefly describe your views on increasing fiber optic broadband internet in Waldeboro.
Well, I dealt with this with John. John come to me a couple years ago, it's probably been 2 years ago, and asked about doing broadband in the unserved areas in the town. And I said, fine, that's not a problem. But he wanted town money. I said, no, if you want it, I'll do everything I can to help you, which I did. I went to the PUC with John, was one meeting, and he got a grant for nothing. I told him anything he could do without costing the town a dime, I would help him 100%. So with Seth saying that, the select board isn't involved as much as they should be, you can probably ask John. I was heavily involved in it. Whatever he needed, I went up, suit and tie and everything, went to the meeting and told these people that why are you going to turn around and get rid of the grants the way they were structured and start all over again? They're putting the cart before the horse. And now you're going backwards. I don't know how to explain it. John could probably explain it better, but they had given us a grant to serve these people, and then they turned around and wanted to turn around and do a development grant. I said, well, why don't you take and give Waldeboro another grant to finish the project, then you're done with us. But I don't know, John said it was a pretty good success up in that area. A lot of people signed up for it. Downtown, if we've already got fiber optics and everything down through there, why aren't the businesses coming? If we've already got this in place, why are they not coming here? There's a reason. And I still revert back to the land use ordinance. And we don't have the space for some reason. Taction wants to come back to Waldeboro. I actually had the opportunity to put them in my building instead of putting 2 apartments above, is add a second floor and put Taction in there. But there again lies on the cost of having them come here. It was going to cost me $55,000 just for a sprinkler system. So that's just an expense to the if I would have to have a long-term contract with them just to even recoup my money on this. So it's businesses can't expand or increase the way the ordinances are written, even at the state level. So broadband is a good thing. I mean, John's done a phenomenal job with it, with getting everybody the opportunity to have it. So.
Can I rebut? Is there a way to do that? I think it's important.
Yeah, I can give you 1 minute to.
So, Abden just said something I think is very important. It's key, actually, to how we may view differences in local government, and maybe national government, I don't know, but local government. And that is that when he was discussing with John how to do it, he said, Connect Me would be great, but we're not going to spend any town money. Well, I have a different view. I think the town has to invest money in broadband, in facilities, perhaps in new sewer extensions. And in fact, I believe, with the economy being an extremely good case, I just asked Eileen today about one small part of our revenue. We enjoyed a excise tax revenue of almost 4% increase last year, and we're above that pace through May 31st of this year. So that's $100,000 in 2 years of additional monies. Now, that's not enough to do broadband, of course. It takes much more than that. But towns, just like businesses, don't grow and succeed and thrive unless you invest in them, whether it's your schools, your infrastructure, your downtown areas, your parks, Route 1, stuff like that. And when the economy's really doing well, super. I mean, Abden's going to have a hard time finding employees for his job. The labor market's so hard. The town should be thinking differently.
Okay, thank you. Abden, do you want to add anything to that?
No, infrastructure is big, and we were just talking about broadband, but infrastructure is huge, and I don't have a problem with the town going after grants for a lot of this stuff. That's where I want to see the money come from.
All right,
Go for that first before we start investing town money.
Excellent. This parlays perfectly into our next question. Abden, how do you propose to help attract more business to town?
I think I've pointed out a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think the role of the planning board and the comprehensive plan committee did an excellent job, and I think implementing that is going to give us a lot of bonuses towards getting grants to help improve these issues that we have. Ronnie Miller had talked about having like Harbor Freight or something, trying to get them in here. Well, we really have no place for them. And I propose possibly turning Old Route 1 into a business Route 1. It may not be all that favorable, but it would put, there's area out there that could be developed just off Route 1. And possibly even put more traffic down through the middle of town, which will increase people coming down through and possibly visiting all the shops and stay on there. That's the problem we have with downtown, is there's not enough traffic there to, promote that area. And I think that's a big issue. And I think changing some of the zoning of just off Route 1 for businesses, so they don't have to be right on Route 1. There's some businesses that don't have to be. You could turn another industrial park or something up there, a small industrial park up on top of the hill off Route 1. There's a house lot development up there. It's never been developed. There's still signs up there saying lots for sale. Why can't we take and have that individual possibly come in and see what he would do if he would willing to turn that into a small industrial park? It's just quarter of a mile, half a mile off Route 1. Trucks wouldn't have any problem. The neighbors, I'm not sure what the neighbors would feel, but I mean, that's just some of the thoughts I've had. And expanding off Route 1 with potential businesses being there. I mean, stacking everything on Route 1 is kind of ridiculous to me. I mean, it's got to be spread out.
Seth, same question. How do you propose to help attract more businesses to town?
I have a complicated answer, and it includes part of what Abner was talking about. I think we need to invest in some infrastructure, in particular sewer and water, for example, up the hill, so that it could be developed. That is all pre-zoned. There's no zoning fight about it. It's perfectly accessible and all that. That's true going to the east as well, up over the hill, past Route 235. There's sort of prime territory to do large-scale home Harbor Freight type development, or who knows, Walmart. We also have a wonderful historic downtown district. We've got some treasures there. We've got the Broad Bay, which does concerts and other events. We've got the Waldo Theater, which is a brand new board, which is really exciting because they're finally getting hold of it. They're about to go into both organizations are about to go into very major fundraising campaigns. Speaking of the Taction building, Sam was contacted, I think, by Taction. Shortly after I rented the third floor of the, we have a tick here we're trying to get rid of.
For you?
This isn't coming out of my time, I hope.
No, I'll stop the clock. Thank you.
Do you need a tool or anything?
It's a tick.
Yeah.
Many jobs of a moderator.
You did sign up for this, did you?
All right, I can't remember. So we have the downtown district, and in fact, as a small business guy, I just had the opportunity to take the old Taction, a piece of the old Taction building, and create what I think is a pretty exciting new high-tech venture, which doesn't need zoning changes, doesn't need anything, just needs a little vision and investment, which I'm trying to make, for a co-working center and an event space on the top of that floor. We've just gone through the whole place, and the good news is, without even opening business, and with no advertising yet until next week, in next week's, or this week's paper, we have filled up all our private office space in the part I lease. Things are popping. There are all kinds of opportunities. One of the ways the town can encourage this is to have an active, out there, going places to business shows and stuff, select board members. The other is to think seriously about spending some town money. And I don't mean necessarily new money. We can do things like TIF investment zones, as Bill Napower, who Abden mentioned, our new planning associate, has been trying to convince us to do, to put aside money so that in 3 or 4 or 5 years, we will have the money to run sewer up to a new business park or something like that, maybe east of town. But we have to be doing it now to put the money away. It's not necessarily new money, it's reallocating small pieces of existing money.
Okay. Very good. Well, speaking of new businesses, recently the Maine legislature overrode a governor's veto of the recreational marijuana law passed by voters in a 2016 referendum. What is your view on how Waldoboro should respond to this recent change in law? And yes, I know it's on our ballot here shortly, but Seth, how would you respond to that?
That's a complicated question, and in a sense, it's a fight I really don't have a dog in, or is it a dog that I don't have a fight in? One or the other. The issue of medical marijuana is pretty clear. In fact, when I was on the planning board, we approved what's the name of the new? Highbrow medicinal marijuana dispensary. I'm all for that. I think it helps people who are really at last wit's end trying to figure out how to deal with cancer and other things, pain management. I'm much less enthusiastic about recreational marijuana. I don't have a problem with it myself. I've never used it. I know that I don't like social clubs. I think that's sort of a crazy idea. I don't know where that idea came from, but it was part of the referendum, so there it is. I don't have strong feelings about retail marijuana sales, for example, in the tobacco shop. I personally consider tobacco and alcohol more dangerous, health-wise and driving-wise, than marijuana. But I don't have much experience driving under either, so I don't know. I think the town has taken a prudent step in implementing a moratorium. I think it gives us some time to think about how to do it. I think that the town should speak on this issue, and I'm sure the town will. There are a lot of people in town that feel both ways. The vote was exactly within something like 0.1% divided evenly. That means there's a lot of not only difference of opinion, but interest, and that's a good thing. And I hope the select board, perhaps even with me on it, would encourage the town to think deeply about this and try to figure out what the economic implications are. You can imagine if the old Best Felt plant, factory here, hadn't been storage, but had been a high-tech processing facility that handled $10 million worth of marijuana. There's a huge tax win in that for this town. And I don't know why we should just automatically, out of hand, say, we're not going to think about that. These are complicated issues, but that's about how I see it.
Okay, thank you. And Abden, what is your view on how Waldoboro should respond to this recent change in law?
I've never touched marijuana in my life. I've never touched a drug in my life. I don't drink. So, a lot of these things, I rely on the town. If the town doesn't want it, that's fine with me. If the town wants it, that's fine with me. I have no way. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. So, the social clubs and the retail, I don't really care for social clubs. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, like I said, because I don't do it. But, social clubs, I really see no need for them. Retail, recreational marijuana, it is a huge economic driver, but there's people in the town that really don't want to see you, which is fine. It doesn't matter either way. I'm going to let the voters dictate what happens. If they don't feel as though, if they feel as though this ordinance is too strict, then they're gonna vote it down. If they really want it, they're gonna vote for it. So, I mean, it's not a tricky thing for me because I've never done it before, so, and I have a lot of friends that do smoke marijuana. So, and I think that was the biggest thing when people see this ordinance, it's just about retail stores and social clubs. And if it's not gonna affect their way of being able to continue the lifestyle that they have, then I don't believe that this ordinance I have an idea this ordinance will pass, just for that aspect. Because as long as you're not infringing on them and allowed to do it, I think this will pass. So,
Can I add one little piece?
Sure.
I imagine, Abdul might agree with me, I think one area where we shouldn't be so free-thinking in our thinking is with the kids. I don't think kids have any, and I feel this medically. I did MRI work a little bit at MIT when I was there, research on brain function. And functional MRI watches how the brain works. One of the things we know, not through any work I did, but it's pretty clear, is brain development is substantially impacted in kids under 21 to 25. That we should be thinking about. We don't want kids, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, high school kids, whatever. If we can help it, we want to advise them not to get involved with it at all until they're adults.
Okay. Abden, anything else you want to add to that?
no, I mean, like I said, if the town decides to not vote in this ordinance, then the marijuana committee still has a moratorium in place to go back and look at this and see what kind of regulations we can put in. So we've put two things in place, and that's one of the things the select board did, is to make sure we had this moratorium in place until the state decided to figure out what they were gonna do. The marijuana committee up there decided what they were going to do, and now we got this other ordinance in to ban these things. So the moratorium was key, and the select board was heavily involved in pushing that in that direction. So,
I think the fact that this issue is going to vote here in Waldeboro has made that question way too easy for you two to answer. All right. Next question here, Abden. What do you feel should be done with the former Sylvania site?
I just walked that site, a couple weeks ago, I guess it was, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I feel like we're missing out on an opportunity. I know they don't want to develop that area, where the footprint is now, which kind of is disheartening because there's 26 acres there, I believe, and I don't know if that site is maybe 3 or 4 acres where the cement is and stuff. That area could have potentially been developed. I think they're just being very cautious with it. They don't want any ramifications from it if they do build there and somebody gets sick and they can fall back on the company. It's kind of too bad. I know there's been talk about putting a solar array on there, up towards a 5 megawatt, I believe.
3 probably.
Yeah, and but that wouldn't be a bad thing. The problem is where is that money going to come from? And that's where my concern comes is people want the town to invest in that. And I'm not really all that keen about the town investing in something that I don't know how to put it, is that everyone's going to benefit. So.
Okay, thank you. Seth, same question.
So I have a different take a little bit. I'm deeply implicated in solar power in general, and in this town in particular, having helped bring the town the solar array up at the landfill, which, as I said, is saving taxpayers a substantial hunk of money already and will save much more in the future. I was immediately drawn to the Sylvania site for reasons that Abden mentions. It's a complicated, polluted brownfield site. The good news is the federal government and the state government, or administered through the state government, basically controls it very well and has for years. They're doing some limited air extraction of the heavy metals and tetrachloroethylene solvents that were dumped by the old company directly into the soil. They have wells all over the place. They're drilling two more. They just drilled two more on the south side in the old, not the Gentner, but the Hofstas property, just to make sure that they know where the plume is going or not. They're monitoring it very closely. Their hands, feet, and fingers and toes are tied by the federal government. They can't get out of this. A company called Leadvance bought it from Osram, which bought it from Sylvania, or was Sylvania, bought it from Siemens. Leadvance is a Chinese LED maker. Leadvance just sold it to a Chinese LED maker, so it's now controlled offshore financially. That makes logistics a little harder, and that's why Michael Lang and the select board instantiated a task force to look into what's going on there. I will say something very radical, and I don't know if I can do it in 30 seconds. I am very much for a private municipal cooperative development effort for grid scale, something like the 3 or 4 megawatt array that Abden talked about. And the great advantage could be the town wouldn't necessarily have to invest money. That would be done by private investors. But the town could grease the wheel making the space available, and the town would make income from this commercial venture, generating just power. This is different than our own municipal power. This is a business venture. I don't think there's anything wrong with the town cooperating with the developer to try, as happens all over the place, to try to bring income back to the town, whether it's a new business or direct income to the town from the profits from the electricity. Why would we not want to lower our tax rates like that, if it's possible? Ron Phillips and I have been talking about this with CEI and the high school, for example, for about 6 months, and it's a very exciting prospect.
Very good. Does that satisfy both of you guys?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, very good. Seth, this is a question that's near and dear to my heart, living on School Street. What is your vision for the future of the A.D. Gray building?
Oh, a sensitive subject. So as some of us know, isn't it good we're laughing? We're talking about it. You know, we're diametrically opposed, and here we are talking about it. That's a good thing. That's excellent. I am a member of the Medina Valley Community Foundation, and I was the one who proposed converting that school building into the Waldoboro Community Center, following the model of the Community Foundation's development of the Miller School ball field some 10 or 12 years ago, started almost 20 years ago, which was a cooperative venture between the town and the foundation. I believe, and I tried to demonstrate, we tried to demonstrate, the foundation, to the town and the select board in particular, and we thought they were listening pretty carefully for 18 months, during which we spent $8,000 in engineering fees and other studies. This would actually work, and it would be revenue positive when we got done with it, with no input from the town at all, at which time we proposed, if the town wanted to take it back, we would give it to the town. So private fundraising, private rehabilitation, develop the anchor tenants, one of which was the early Head Start program, who actually wanted to double the size of their program and put in a rented space in that building where they'd have space, an early Head Start program, which Waldoboro has, in the region, has always needed, and there's never been space for it. The selectmen, in their wisdom, after 18 months of, I hope, listening to us, decided to sell the building. The town has put, out of the Ann K. Bailey Fund, $225,000 in restoration funds alone, trying to get it, put a new roof on, do asbestos abatement, do plumbing internally, putting the building in a halfway decent place to start a project like this. They can't sell the lots, according to Bill Napower, our new planner, for more than $25,000 each. And to tear the building down, which was the last thing I heard the select board wanted to do, would cost over $100,000. I don't think those numbers make sense to me. I think we need a community center. I think that's one place for it. If the town people are absolutely dead set against it, which is not what a townwide survey indicated, 80% said they wanted it there, then we should build it somewhere else. But we should build it.
Okay, we're going to go to Abden to answer that same question. What is your vision for the future of the A.D. Gray
Well,
building?
I went to school to that building, and I've had a relationship with that building, but still, we've, number of years, when we took it over, we tried to give it away. We couldn't give it away. So this last, with Seth's venture of trying to do this, I don't believe the select board was convinced of what could happen, of this venture could actually happen. And Bob Butler had suggested maybe we'll put it back on the market for a year. And I reluctantly said, fine, we'll try it one more year, but we also should be looking at leveling that building, turning it into a vacant lot, and maybe a developer, or even putting a new recreational center there would be much more appealing than having an old building that people are gonna have to invest way too much money into a building that is still gonna be an old building. And if they wanted to come in and build a brand-new building that was up, state of the art, and it may cost them even less money than it would to renovate this old building. And for Seth's estimates of what it would cost for the town, for the removal of that building was, the town could do it for around $60,000. So, and the land is actually valued at like 52,000. So the town could take and remediate that building and turn it into a vacant lot and potentially either put a recreational center there or sell it to a developer that would turn it back onto the tax base. That's been under the town's control for so long that we've gained nothing out of it. All it's done is cost us money. So we've got to make a move. And like I said, I reluctantly went with Bob and let it go for another year, and I think we really need to look at doing something with that lot instead of just letting it sit there.
Okay, I think
I would like to add a little bit to respond to his.
I was gonna try to just close it off there because I don't wanna go too far into this subject, but I'll give you,
Fair enough, 3 seconds.
Yeah, sure.
If we can't give the building away, we're not gonna sell it. I think that's clear. The town was asked for no money to do any of this. It was a complete foundation effort. The town would then have the choice to not do it or do it. Our engineers tell us the building is completely sound, perfectly adequate. We could super insulate it and make it cost-effective energy to heat it, stuff like that. I still think it has potential. Old buildings built like the proverbial brick outhouse that place is, as you know, they don't fall down, they're strong. They're hard to work with, but you can work with them, and it's an asset we've spent almost $250,000 on, the town, and we shouldn't just throw it away. That's
okay.
burning money.
Okay, and do you wanna respond to that at all?
It wasn't town money, it was money left to us by an individual.
80
that-
grand trust fund.
Yes, exactly. So it was not town taxpayer money. And you keep saying that, and that's not true.
It wasn't taxpayer, I stand corrected. I didn't mean taxpayer, I meant a
And that's
fund for
what
the
gets
town.
people upset, is because you're saying that, and it makes people think that we're spending all this money on this building,
Good.
and we're not. It was a trust fund set up for that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. We just came from a sort of a heated topic there, and I now have my pointed questions, which are, I don't know, shall we turn the heat up a little more in here? I developed these questions over the last few days. I have run them by some of my colleagues at the high school. They've been deemed fair, but they are serious questions. Abden, as a selectman, part of your responsibilities are to act as a town assessor. Yet as a member of the House of Representatives for the state of Maine, you are not legally allowed to fulfill this role. How do you reconcile this conflict in a manner that would satisfy your constituents?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. How would you rectify it? I mean, it's a state law, so would you have to change the state law to do this? This is a question, that may need to be answered, but, I mean, I'm like I said, I'm not really, how do I put this?
To be fair, this was not meant to be an easy question.
No, I'm just trying to, how do you rectify the situation?
Right.
I mean, do you change the state law to do this? I feel as though I should still be on there doing this, but I'm not allowed to. No, if the state law, if people felt as though the state law needed to be changed to allow this, I think then maybe something should be done. But I'm not really sure that it is, I honestly don't think it's fair to the town that I have to recuse myself from this, because I fight tooth and nail for the taxpayers to try to save them as much money as possible. So
Can we
it's
ask a question, because some of us may not,
Sure, and actually, I can expand on this. I did some research on this earlier. There's the Maine Municipal Association has a series of letters and whatnot asked of the various secretaries of state or something like that throughout the years, and what I was able to come up with was the state considers assessors to be state officers because they assess tax values and whatnot, and you can't serve as a state officer and as a state representative at the same time, and not all towns. In fact, probably I'm not sure how many towns have assessors and selectmen one and the same.
Right.
But Waldeboro does.
Yeah.
Which makes this a
A
difficult situation.
Yeah, how do you fix the problem? And, and I'm sure there's people out there who could answer
And,
that.
and there may not be a way to.
Right,
does,
they may not.
does the state consider those two rules to be in conflict?
That's right,
Okay,
because of the taxing.
right, because in one hand you're representing the people, in the other hand you're
Representing the state.
Yep,
So can I ask a qualifying question about that? Presumably you recuse yourself from all Board of Assessors hearings.
Yes.
So that seems like, in the short term, a perfectly appropriate and right thing to
Right,
do.
yep.
Fortunately, we have 5 select board, so they're only down 1 if
Correct.
Abden has to recuse himself. And I would say that's a good way to finesse it in this case. I mean, if it was a 3-man board, that would be a very, very different situation. And that would, I don't know what to do. But
Right.
in this case, that seems to me like a perfectly appropriate and honorable way to manage it, the way it was done.
That was very diplomatic of you.
No, I mean, it's common sense, isn't it?
Yeah. Are we all set with that?
Yep.
Okay, you're off the hot seat.
Yep, that's fine.
Seth, you're on the hot seat. Waldeboro has been spoken of from time to time as a divided community. As the only candidate from away, how will you avoid dividing the community further?
A good question, and one I think a lot about. I am from away, and I'll die from away. That's just the way it is. That doesn't daunt me. I think I've contributed many things, worked long and hard for committees, for the planning board for almost 5 years. I don't hesitate to throw in my shovel and start to dig. I don't consider myself, except in some, not of my choosing, somewhat divisive areas that have occurred in particular in political areas in the town, in town government. I know I can be very opinionated and outspoken and forceful. It's just my nature. You don't survive at a place like where I used to work at MIT unless you're that way. And I try to control that. I also think I'm a very good listener, and I think my track record demonstrates I do listen to people, and I change. I don't think I'm a divisive person. I don't think there's anything inherently divisive about newness, change, a different approach, maybe a radically different approach in terms of taxation and municipal spending and finance, developing a community center. These are honest differences between people. I have no problem with that. The town has to decide that. And I don't think by Abden and I sitting here expressing different opinions, for example, about the 80 Gray, which I respect his opinion. I don't think that's a divisive issue. I think that's just one that needs to be decided. It's as simple as that. It's a little bit like the marijuana issue. I'm a little surprised and pleased to hear Abden say he has friends that smoke. I don't think I have any friends that smoke marijuana, but I did. I mean, when I was young, everybody smoked, it seemed like. But I don't have a particular axe to grind there, and I don't want to cramp their lifestyle. Why shouldn't they be able to live their own life, particularly on their own property with, what do you call it, weed that they grow themselves? I don't have a problem with that. I do care about drugs a great deal in kids, and I care about poverty, which feeds the drug cycle. And I also believe the select board has a responsibility and an obligation to do stuff about that too. And I don't see quite so much of that activity historically, and I'd like to help change that. I do believe we can change it. We're not going to change it if we don't try.
Okay, thank you. Back to the easy questions. These are just a few wrap-up questions for both of you, and then we'll go to the public questioning. So, Seth, what makes you feel you are a more viable candidate for selectman?
I don't know if I'm more viable. I guess I'm a sort of a hyper-rationalist, and I think I might be a more useful candidate or selectman. And I'll give you a couple of examples. like Abden, I care passionately about this town. Unlike Abden, I didn't come by it naturally. I was not born and bred here. I moved here. And that means I chose to move here. Of all the places I could go, and believe me, I could go anywhere I want, I chose this place. And I love it. I have a great little farmstead down on Gross Neck. You can hear me getting emotional. I really like it. And where I live, I like to contribute to. That's important to me. It's part of who I am. I'm also experienced in real estate, construction, computer science, a number of other avenues, grant funding, grant writing. And the example I was going to give you, I'll just give you one, was the Pine Street grant we got. We had a town planner here for a little while under the last town manager, Emily Reinhold, a nice young woman. And she successfully got a $160,000 grant from a historical foundation to land preservation, I guess, to purchase the Pine Street landing, little sliver all the way from the boat ramp up almost to the bridge. It was adjacent to and contiguous with a piece the town already owns, where the elver fishing goes on. You see it right there at the step of the bridge on the west side. Due to lack of experience, not only on Emily's part and the town manager's part, which is not our new town manager, who I think is a lot more competent and probably would have caught this, they didn't sign a purchase, option to purchase with the seller of the land, who subsequently changed his mind. And we lost not only the land, a beautiful piece of walkway and waterfront for the development of the historic district, we lost $160,000 of money that had been worked hard for, and which the select board completely supported. Maybe if somebody on the select board had said, wait a minute, don't you need an option on that to lock that up? That's the kind of experience I can bring. It's just one little piece, one little example. It didn't happen, and the town lost because of that. And so maybe that's something else I can add.
Okay, thank you. Abden, what makes you feel you are a more viable candidate?
Well, I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. Like I said, I went from running the Shellfish Committee to being on the Select Board. I was pretty hesitant. I got out of my comfort zone and did get on the Select Board. The first year I was pretty quiet. Second year I got a little more active. My passion's the river, so that's front and center for everything, because I mean we do between 1.6 and 2.2 million dollars a year out of that river to the people that live in this town. We're the biggest clam producer in the town, in the state, and you know, advancing myself to the select board and then just a state representative, I just like to challenge myself, and I like to challenge other people. Our new town manager, I've challenged her to the point where she just shakes her head when I ask her questions, but she's been very good to work with, and I feel as though that's what we need on that board, is people that are willing to work together and have a good relationship with the people in the office. And I think to Seth's point, where we had in our past town manager, there was no good vibe or connection with the select board at all. It was just like oil and water.
Or the committees.
Or the committees. And I think that was a big key for me to get on and run for select board the last time, was to get on there and try to, I'm good at trying to motivate people in a forward direction. And I continue to do that. So, and that's, I mean, Seth can say, you know, he can do what he can, but you need everybody. You can't do it all on your own. I don't care how hard you try. I had to go out and recruit people to get onto the Shellfish Committee to help me do what needed to be done. And I've successfully done that, and that's why I think the select board has been good at putting people on boards that are willing to try to do that and move the town forward.
All right, very good. Just real quick, before we go to the public comments, I'll give you each 2 minutes to let the public know anything else that you want after we've had this nice back and forth. And Abden, we'll start with you.
I don't know, I just hope to get your vote. I'd like to continue my work and being on the select board. Like I said, the select board we have right now is works really well together. We get a lot of things done, and that's my goal. And anything I do is to get a job done and move on to the next project. And I'd like to continue to do that.
Very good, thank you. And Seth?
I guess I would fundamentally disagree a little with Abden. I think Abden's one of the more active select board members. I don't think all of them are quite so active. And I think we cannot, as a town, afford to have inactive select board members. We've got to have a little new blood, a little more work. And as Abden pointed out just a second ago, I don't intend, my example wasn't to intend to say I could do anything by myself. Is to say another perspective, maybe a radically different one than is represented right now. Somebody who has business experience, somebody who has broader social experience, has been out a little bit more, professional career, could add some things to the deliberations of the select board that would make the team more effective. It's not about an individual member, it's about new blood, new vision, and new ideas. I think this town needs that. We have a great new town manager who is radically different than our last town manager, or the last several even. There's nothing wrong with John Speary, who's great, but that's a sea change. That just makes everything different. I mean, being in this room, most select board meetings, and just watching the interactions is just a world of difference. There isn't this nastiness and tension all the time. That's great, but it's not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient, as you say in logic. I would like to add a piece to the mix that might be really, really useful for the town. And I want to lighten up Abden. I want to say two things about Abden himself and his business. I've been wondering why there wasn't a shucking shack in town for years. Why not keep the value added right here in town? I applaud Abden for doing it and going through all the rigmarole like every business has to do it. He's also going to bring jobs if you can find somebody to work for him. It's hard.
I got plenty of people lined up. I get
Okay.
people stopping all the time.
That's the
When are
kind,
you open? When are you opening?
that's the kind of growth we need in town. We really do. And I'm doing my part with the Brooder, the former Fieldcrest, turning into a light industrial. The new annex, which is a completely and radically different kind of business than probably Waldeboro ever thought of, but it's the perfect fit for Waldeboro, it seems to me. And we'll see if that business works well. It seems to be working well, and we're not even open yet. So that's a good sign. And I think that kind of just different set of ideas might be really useful to the select board. And I would like to offer, I do have a track record. I've been on a bunch of committees that have done interesting, I think Abden would agree, work that he supported.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, both of you, for fielding these questions. And now we'll turn it over to the public. I am going to ask if you do have a question to please limit your questioning to 20 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds. And of course, please remain civil in this process. So if anybody has a question, feel free to step up to the mic.
Do I have to step up to the mic?
Yes,
You
please.
can all hear me. I don't know either one of you personally. And
Could you, I
If
think
you could-
because it's on TV and whatnot.
oh dear, okay. I don't know either one of you personally.
Could be a
Could you just
start.
tell us your name and?
My name is Jan, and I'm actually a nurse. And Seth, I'm going to address you.
Sure.
And this is going to be hard to live into 20 seconds. You clearly have a plethora of experience and background. And you talk about it very, very eloquently. But I know about you from what I read in the newspaper and some of the things that you write. And watching the two of you in your style and presentation, you're critically different. I see great authenticity with you, Abden. I see that you're authentic, but it seems to me that you have a history of having a difficult time collaborating. You've written some very biting letters, very lengthy and biting letters in the newspapers, which are quite offensive to me and to other people in this town that I know, public figures that I know. And I wonder if you have the skill set to correct that style to be successful. And that's really more a comment than a question. Thank you.
Shall we respond to that?
Yes, please.
So I guess I would respond by saying it is often, thank you for the comment, and you're right. I do write letters to the paper, not infrequently, about things that are near and dear to my heart, and I hope to speak accurately, rigorously, and challengingly. That's what letters to the editor are about. I don't ask everybody to agree with them. I hope you aren't offended by them, but I know a lot of people are sometimes offended when you introduce a new idea. The idea of a social club in town, it just drove everybody nuts for 6 months, when the legislation passed. Lots of things like that. I think civil discourse is key and critical. I think that's one of the things, in an interesting way, the new town manager has introduced into select board meetings. There's actually some laughing that goes on in our select board meetings. There's some humor, some self-deprecating humor. This is good. This is how you grease the wheel of social discourse. And that's what the select board meetings are. They're talking to town residents, and most importantly, listening to town residents. I don't apologize for having strong opinions and feelings and sometimes suggestions. And I'd like to share even more than, we don't have time tonight, but as I said, I'm an active thinker and doer, and it's very hard to restrain myself, particularly when I think it might help my community, which is why I'm on the school board. I'm really excited about the trade school, for example. Get me going about that.
Okay, thank you. Another public question? Is that a mobile mic?
I think we can, yeah,
Is it working?
I think it is.
Well, I think it just picks up for the camera.
Yeah, maybe.
Go ahead.
Oh, you asked a question about landline for computer.
Yes.
You can't get a landline up to my house. Well, I'm too far away from the road.
Okay. What road is that?
What? Depot Street.
Depot Street.
Yes.
I live behind the railroad tracks.
So would you like to see expansion of
What?
that line?
I've talked to them about that.
There's no cable run up through there?
Cable won't reach.
Okay, so if you would address that.
So why don't you go first?
I mean, I think the
And I ain't paying $60 a month for $100 a month for satellite, and I will not have use internet because they want a debit card, and I ain't giving them a debit card, and I can't see what I'm getting. I can't see the hookup. I ain't gonna have them tear the walls up in my house.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I think I would revert back to the communications committee. I mean, if that's an issue, John or the committee should be bringing it to the select board, or they should be looking at possibly fixing this issue and bringing it to the select board, or going for a grant. I mean, that's what these committees are for. Everything shouldn't have to come to the select board. I mean, I don't take my problems to the select board from the Shellfish Committee. I don't think the planning board should unless there's an issue. Bring it when there's an issue. And I think if he has an issue, if he brings it to the town, it should go to the committee. Then the committee tries to figure it out. If they can't figure it out, then they can bring it to the select board.
Okay.
And I think there's a chain of events that have to happen before it gets to the select board. I think that's why the select board picks these committees to fix these problems if possible. If not, then it resorts back to the select board. I mean, like I said, I don't come to the select board to fix any of the Shellfish Committee problems. I usually work with the state. That's what these committees are supposed to do.
Right.
In my particular case, I mean, and with being on the planning board, I was on the planning board for 6 years. I mean, when we had issues, we would work on them, take them to the select board and see if we could get them corrected.
Very good.
And I think that's the biggest key is, with his issue is, he should come down and ask a question at the town office with the planner and have it directed to that committee.
Excellent.
So I guess I disagree a little bit. It is critical for everybody in town to have access to broadband, to a computer line, a landline as you call it. Whether it's a cable connection or broadband, hopefully a fiber optic connection, which is what John's working so hard on with his committee. It has proven to be a very difficult problem to convince what are called incumbent providers, Time Warner, which is now Spectrum, and LCI, to extend service to you. And in fact, it's pathetic in a sense. I have a business, the old Fieldcrest Nursing Home. It's called the Bug Tussle Brooder. It's industrial. I can't get fiber up there. We're only a quarter of a mile from the main route in Maine. It seems absurd. What that says to me is, notwithstanding what the committee's doing, which they've worked for 5 years on this, or 4 years, and I was part of that work for a while, something has to break the logjam. Something has to move it forward. I believe that the select board should be proactive and work with the committees, absolutely. But if that's not sufficient, talk to the county people, talk to the legislature, talk to the vendors who might. It's not unheard of for a town, for example, with the franchise agreement, which we haven't been able to successfully conclude with the Time Warner for years. We're operating on from 1997 or something like that. It's years old. The town could push these things harder, and I believe should, because in the end, it's the residents who suffer. It's not members of the select board, it's not people who live in town, it's not me who has cable down on Gross Neck, maybe not great cable, but at least I have it. It's everybody else in the outlying areas. And affordability is a big thing. I think affordability should be something the town, through the select board, pushes the local vendors to do the right thing on. Offer low-cost services. Why should somebody pay $100 out of a, who knows, let's say, for example, Social Security check, for minimalist, like 5 megabit, if that, connection to the internet, which really isn't sufficient for anything, when possibly the town could help move the ball forward, even regionally, the way we did with solar power.
All right, thank
It's
you.
just a different outlook.
Other questions? Yes, please.
I'll use my teacher's voice, and I don't need to be on camera. I want to make a comment, Abden, about the difficulty in bringing business into this town.
Yep,
It does need to change.
absolutely.
We certainly need businesses here. They have to go so many hoops, it's unbelievable.
Yep,
I mean, why would anybody want?
I'm
to
living
come
proof, so.
here? Why would anybody want to come here?
Yep, and that's my point exactly, and I,
Right,
like I said,
right.
and hopefully the comprehensive plan will help with that, maybe make adjustments to the land use ordinance and alleviate some of that. And I really hope that's
Yeah.
what happens.
My
If not,
first-
then the select board is really gonna step up and say, look, we gotta do this way, or we're not gonna be successful at this. And
My
I
first conversation with Julie at the Waldeboro Day last year, I said, the main problem in this town is we have to change the image of Waldeboro.
Yep.
Back to where it was when I grew up here. True, I spent many years in another state and earned my living there, but when I came back here, I just can't talk about it, I get too emotional about it. But Waldeboro has to change the image.
Yep.
They have to change the image.
Yep.
And you're gonna do that by bringing businesses in here, by seeing cooperation among your town officials, and that's my comment to
Yep,
Aaron. My
yep.
question for you, Mr. Hall,
Yes.
is, you are supposedly a small business person here. I want to know what you are going to do with the property next to the library. I mean, it is sitting there to me disgracing and devaluing Main Street. What are your plans for that, and when are they going into action?
Fair question. So I bought the Kennedy House, so-called,
Yeah.
from the town indirectly, not from the town, sorry, wrong property. I bought it at auction from Camden National Bank. The previous owner had really let it go to hell in a handbasket. Since then, we've basically gutted the inside of the building.
Pardon?
We've basically gutted the inside of the building. It was, the fellow that lived there was a bit of a hoarder.
I know that.
Yeah, and there were like 50 cats in there.
Yep.
And so it was a challenge. We did that. We almost immediately cleaned up the grounds. We made the entire side next to the
I
library.
disagree with you right there.
If we could maintain civility in this meeting,
Okay,
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry.
And in fact, last weekend, I did it again, getting rid of all the Japanese knotweed. So you see the nice stones, which are actually on my property, those big blocks of stone, and it gives a nice visage. That said, that was a property we had not intended to start working on immediately when we bought it. The house is stable. We are going to paint it this summer. I have cleaned up the entire front yard, cut the trees back. It's no longer hidden in trees and sort of wet and moldy. It's a process, as any business is a process. I have quite a few, as a private citizen, I have quite a few irons in the fire right now, as you may read in the paper. What that means is I'm an active new businessman in town who's doing stuff, for one thing, and who's very interested in helping other people do stuff. And I think that changes the attitude in town. You know, the Waldeboro Business Association does yeoman's work in this regard, trying to get the good word out about what an incredible place we are to live, what a beautiful river we have. All of the resources in this town, they're just amazing. There are going to be some long derelict, challenging properties. I did not need a new property in the historic village in Waldeboro. I bought it because I was afraid it would fall down. That's the direct answer to your question. I hope to have somebody run a B&B there when we get done rehabbing it. We're gonna have to tear off the old shed in the back, which was collapsing when I bought it and has collapsed more. There's a lot of work in the job. That's what business is. It's hard work and investing money. If I had more money to invest, it would be done by now. It's gonna take some time. But just like the nursing home, I brought 2 new jobs to town by building a woodworking shop at a derelict nursing home that had been closed for 10 years. That's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. Is it the prettiest building in town yet? No, but we're working on it. It's a process.
Okay, thank you.
May I respond?
Uh, Can you keep the 15 to 20 seconds?
I don't see all the things happening that you say are happening there. And, I mean, do you have a time when this is going to happen to that building?
I'm gonna interject as the moderator, and I
Okay.
think Seth has answered that fairly.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for the candidates?
Oh, come on. More questions.
I just want to say, I'm Marcia Drenzik, I just want to say I commend both of you for the way you've handled this evening, and for
Yep.
both of you for running for office.
Yep.
You know, it's obvious you're both interested, and you both have strong ideas, and, I want to thank you both for being here tonight.
Yep, well, thank you.
I do have one last thing.
Yeah.
I would like to request that we refer to select persons.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
select
Select person.
people instead of select men.
May I make a small comment about that?
Yeah, sure, and I'm gonna follow it up with my own comments.
A couple of years ago, I stood up as a select board member and commended Jan Minzy for saying exactly that and suggested we do it officially. I think the board itself largely does that, if I'm not mistaken. It's much less select man, it's more select person now. And in the paper, I am scrupulous to say that.
Well, but here, several of
Yeah,
them did
I
not
wanna
say
mention,
select
Jan
persons,
had
it said select-
emailed me, Jan's a good friend of mine, and I completely forgot to incorporate that,
Thank you.
those pronouns and whatnot, and I'll have to apologize to Jan, because this has all been captured on camera, so I'm in big trouble. But,
She's very precise.
and yeah, any other public comment? I personally, as the moderator, would like to thank the candidates for sharing your views. As a town member, I really appreciate it. As the government teacher at the high school, I really appreciate your willingness to interact with the public and share your ideas and thoughts with your constituency. So thank you very much.
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. We were hopeful that maybe next year, through Jacob, that we might get some of the high school students
Yes.
up here to participate at our next candidates night, and maybe little by little, we can get a closer relationship with the kids, because this affects them as much as it affects us. And thank you guys for coming and for having questions and for listening to these guys. And one of the things that's great about our Maine, actually, but all our towns in Maine, is that we go through this all the time. And we have candidates and people willing to serve and people willing to sit with our neighbors and talk and answer questions like this. This doesn't happen everywhere, you know. Lots of places have gotten so big that it just doesn't happen like this face to face. So we're very lucky. And most of the time what we find is that we aren't really far apart in what we think or how we feel or how we want to move forward. It may be just a little bit of, you know, style sometimes, or maybe a little bit of
Nuance. even.
nuance,
Yeah.
really. I mean, so thank you guys for coming out and for taking the time, and I appreciate it all the time because I think it's a great thing that we get to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
If anybody's interested, this isn't the campaign pitch.